Good morning. Welcome to another podcast. This is AJ from uh, the Mind Rolling podcast. This episode I'm really excited about. It really blends the ideas of creativity and spirituality really closely. This episode is about flow state. I got the idea to do this next episode on flow state. I was reading this Zen Masterclass book by Hodge last night, and it was really cool. I was actually playing with my son, who's about 6 months old, and thankfully there was nothing on TV, so we decided to listen to music. And we made some impromptu drums. He's got this little Minnie Mouse ball that has a bell on the inside. It was handed down from his girl cousins to Pink, and we put a AA battery in a bottle, in a plastic bottle. And I took a can of thin hairspray, and I was shaking the bottle in one hand and hitting the drum to a slow beat, and hitting the Minnie Mouse with the hairspray like a drum to a slow beat, and we were just listening to great music and jamming. And my son was like, "Oh, he's only 6 months, a little baby," and he's like, "Oh, I wanna play too." So he started slapping the ground, and he took that battery bottle from me and started shaking the hell out of it, and time flew by. It's like 2 hours went by. We just jammed, and we got into kind of a flow state. And coincidentally, after we took a break, or maybe it was during dinner, or I forget, but I pulled out this Zen book and started reading about this guy Takuan. Takuan Soto is his name. Lived from the late 16th century to the mid 17th century. And his quote here, the subtitle of this chapter, if you have the book, it's page 112. It says, "When a person does not think, where shall I put it? The mind will extend throughout the entire body and move to any place at all. The effort not to stop the mind in just one place. This is discipline." So it's like an anti-effort, the effort to not stop the mind. And that's how we can get into the flow state. Funny thing about this Takuan is he's actually, they named crunchy yellow pickle made out of pickled radish that everyone still eats here in Japan after him. So he's got a funny name. It would be like naming your kid Dill, or I don't know, Dill, yeah. So, anyway, Takuan. They tried to get him to study Pure Land Buddhism, which is kind of a strict doctrinal form of Buddhism, if I'm not mistaken. I've never studied it, so I could be wrong there, but it was like, no way, I'm out of there, screw that. And he went and studied Zen, and he traveled. He was nomadic, traveled around. Eventually the emperor heard about his teachings and said, like, "Oh, you got to teach for me. You got to teach for my people, my important people." And he said yes because he kind of had to. And then he went there, and he's like, "Screw this. These people are douches," and he left. He had the nickname as the Naked Monk. He was hanging up his robe naked, and everyone saw him and laughed at him, and he was like, he turned the tables on him. He's like, "I'm sorry, you all don't become naked. Aren't you painted by your greedy clinging to things, fame, property, and possessions? If you become a naked monk like me, you will feel better." He was like, "Oh, told you." But when he died, he said, "Bury my body on the mountain behind the temple, throw some earth on it, and go away." And then as he lay dying, they asked for a parting message, and he wrote the character. He wrote it out for dream, the Chinese character for dream. So that's kind of his life story, but he's really famous for this teaching the swordsman the idea of flow state, which is why I'm bringing him up. There was this swordsman, Yagyu Munemori, and although Taekwon was not in any sense a warrior, probably never even held a sword in his life, he was able to make useful observations about Zen and passed them along to Munemori. The Zen and the samurai goes back to like the 1100s, late 12th century to early 14th century, the Kamakura period. They were studying Zen. So, the guy named Eisai popularized it. But basically, Hodge says, faced with the prospect of imminent death, samurai needs to maintain the highest level of awareness if he is to survive combat. The Zen concept of no thought was attractive as a way to develop all-around awareness, in which attention pervades your entire body and its surroundings without being fixed to any single object, so as to allow an immediate response to any situation. Taekwon eloquently described the martial application of this state of mind. He said, "When you see with a quick glance the sword of your opponent raised to strike you, if you think about parrying the blow with your sword, your actions will be impeded and you will die. Instead," he said, "to do this, you should allow your mind to flow without attachment to thoughts and emotions. Even when you see the sword of your opponent descending, do not fix your mind upon it, and do not think about adjusting to the speed of your opponent's sword in order to return the blow. Give up all distinctions and plans. Thus, to attain victory in combat, a warrior should focus neither on himself nor on his opponent, but allow the body to react without the interference of conceptual thought." Allow the body to react without the interference of conceptual thought. It's beautiful. There's something to be said about repetition and practice and achieving creativity through repetition. I think I've talked about that before. But basically, when you're practicing, you can, maybe on the first day of practice, you're all intuitive thought. You're all thinking about every part as you practice. Maybe you do that in your warm-ups, even as you get better. But then over time, you start taking that intuitive thought out of it, and you start just performing. You start just being complete action. I think that's what Taekwon was saying. You see these kendo teams. Kendo is kind of, it's what the samurai practiced. So they didn't kill each other in practice. They used these wooden reed swords, these bamboo kind of swords, and they were helmets. You've probably seen it. And we see them practicing, and they're just doing the same thing over and over, just hit, 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 hit. And they kind of practice Japanese baseball in the same way. It's very different than American baseball. American baseball, kids grow up learning to play the game. It's not a battle. And I think you can achieve flow state through play as well. It's not one way, but I think it's important to consider the meditative side of rote practice. there's a famous thing about Hunter S. Thompson. He wanted to know what it felt like to write a masterpiece. So he sat down in one sitting, typed out The Great Gatsby on a typewriter. Maybe he tapped into some of that flow state there, going through repetitively like that. One of my favorite flow state topics is that highlight Michael Jordan's talking about getting in the zone, and he says the basket just looks like a big old bucket. He was a gym rat. He practiced more than anyone. And I think you get into those zones because of all that practice, and you can see things from a different perspective. Things slow down, things seem bigger, easier, and that's the flow state. Perception changes. But I think that practice has to be there. So I'm going to stop there. I've got some more articles and clips to play on this. So when I come back for the next episode, I'm going to play a clip by the professor who kind of popularized flow state. His name is Mihaly. I can't pronounce it. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Anyways, he's a professor at the University of Chicago, and he's the first guy to kind of come up with he coined the term flow state, and he studied it at the University of Chicago. So I'll start off the next portion with a clip from him, and I'll criticize a little bit about what he says, but I think he's got some really inspiring points as well. So that's all for this first part. I'll be back shortly. Thanks. Don't forget to check out the AJ Snook blog. So the Mindloft podcasts are all on there. I have links as well to SoundCloud and archive.org where you can download them. But you can download them off the archive.org player that's embedded into the blog. If you have an extra buck, I'd appreciate any help I can get. If not, don't worry about it. And, just keep meditating and keep being creative. And I think you're putting your consciousness out into the world and sharing your perspective is all we can do to try to change things for the better. So talk to you soon.
Flow is a state of mind or a state of experience that we feel when we are totally involved in what we are doing. I began to notice how important this feeling is in the arts, for instance, for painters or musicians who, when a painter begins to fill a white canvas, a canvas with nothing on it, and he or she begins to put colors on this canvas and begins to develop a shape, develop a painting that will be important to them and to the public. The artist completely loses track of the time. They don't notice they're hungry, they're tired. They are just sometimes working for days without stopping. And that feeling that then they try to explain it to someone who wasn't involved in the painting, and they explain it as being completely carried away, almost like being in a river and the flow of the water takes them on. The state of mind has the same characteristics. Everybody describes it as being very focused, very clear goals, immediate feedback through the action, and balance of challenges and skills. So this is the experience of flow as they describe it in art, in sports, in music, and every time a person is really involved in what they're doing. For instance, one of the most successful examples is a Swedish company called Green Cargo, which has been losing money for 125 years, and every year losing money. Partly, the only way they could afford that was that they were a government company of transportation, which were state-owned. And then a person who learned about flow became the human resource manager for Green Cargo, and he started applying flow principles in that company. And it turned out that after 2 years, for the first time in 125 years, Green Cargo made a profit, and since then, apparently speaking, still profit. But that's not the only company. There are many. Microsoft is using it. There is a company here close to Los Angeles, Patagonia, which makes clothes for outdoors for sports people. And that's a very good example of a company that is able to introduce flow in the work.
Okay, I'm back, and I found a really good article yesterday. What I've been doing to pass the time is when I have to go to these staff meetings at work, I find a PDF on one of these topics that I like, and print it out, and then I can put it on my clipboard and read it as the meeting's going on, and it's not conspicuous. I've seen other teachers bring in books to read and even tablets. I think that attracts a little too much attention. So anyway, I found this really good article. I read through the whole thing, underlined a bunch of interesting stuff. It's called The Concept of Flow, and it's by Gene Nakamura and Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Oh, he has his first name in his last name. I'm just going to call him Mihaly. M-I-H-A-L-Y is his first name. And then the suffix of his last name is M-I-H-A-L-Y-I. He's the guy who's just in the clip that you listen to. And he's the pioneer of this type of research. Wish he had an easier name, though. Jesus. Okay. They write. And the title of this, it's at chapter 7 from a book that doesn't say the name of the book, but if you just Google Nakamura Mihaly Concept of Flow and then filter your search, advanced search for .pdf, it'll come up on the first page. That's how I found it. I just looked up his name and flow and looked for a PDF file. So to find good articles, that's one little simple technique I do, is I just do the advanced search for PDF files. It's a lot of these things are in PDF. Okay. What constitutes a good life? Flow research has yielded one answer, providing an understanding of experiences during which individuals are fully involved in the present moment. A good life is one that is characterized by complete absorption in what one does. A good life is one that is characterized by complete absorption in what one does. Oh, that's good. And you can see how meditation and Zen could easily be applied here. So, and we can talk more about Taquan and his ideas soon, but I just want to keep reading through this. It's really good stuff. And Haley was struck by the fact that when work on the painting was going well, the artist persisted single-mindedly, disregarding hunger, fatigue, and discomfort, yet rapidly lost interest in the artistic creation once it had been completed. Origin in a desire to understand this phenomenon of intrinsically motivated or autotelic activity, activity rewarding in and of itself. Auto equals self, telos equals goal. So people are just being rewarded by the activity, by doing, not by the end result. So then Csikszentmihalyi investigated the nature and conditions of enjoyment by interviewing chess players, rock climbers, dancers, and others who emphasized enjoyment as the main reason for pursuing an activity. So he focused on play and games. But there's also been studies of surgeons, people who are generally extrinsically motivated. They want money for their work, a lot of money. And they found, interesting enough, that flow state can be detected even in those high-paid jobs. So flow state's possible in work and in play, but most of the studies have been done in play. Challenges. So there are perceived challenges that stretch existing skills, and there's a sense that one is engaging challenges at a level appropriate to one's capacities. I'll talk more about that. Basically, your skill level and the challenge level are about the same. The clear proximal goals and immediate feedback are there as well. So, proximal goals that are clear. You can see when you're doing well easily. Part of that is your skill level, though. I think with a higher skill level, the easier it is to evaluate yourself in the moment, and the easier it is to evaluate yourself kind of organically, like you kind of just know what good is and what not good is. Under these conditions, experience seamlessly unfolds from moment to moment, and here are the characteristics of how it should feel when you're in the flow state. Intense and focused concentration on what you're doing in the present moment. Merging of action and awareness. Loss of reflected self-consciousness, i.e. loss of awareness of oneself as a social actor. Sense that one can control one's actions. That is, the sense that you can, in principle, deal with the situation because you know how to respond to whatever happens next. You have that expert quality. There's a distortion of time. Usually it's passing faster than normal, and the experience of the activity is intrinsically rewarding, and often the end goal is just an excuse to do the process. You say, well, I want to win a medal, I want to win a ribbon, I want to get a trophy, but you don't really. You just want to race, you just want to play. When in flow, the individual operates at full capacity. The state is one of dynamic equilibrium. Entering flow depends on establishing a balance between perceived action capacities and perceived action opportunities. So just what I was saying before, a balance between your level of expertise and the level of difficulty. If you're a beginning chess player and you play a Russian master, you're not going to get into a flow state. But if you play another beginning chess player, you know, you might be able to. But beginner, again, I don't think that's a correct analogy, because you have to have, I've said it, you have to have some kind of expertise in order to get this flow state. So you have to trudge through those beginning stages and improve and improve and improve. The balance is fragile. If challenges begin to exceed skills, one first becomes vigilant and then anxious. But if skills begin to exceed challenges, then you become relaxed, but eventually bored. So find balance there. There's been studies through art and science, aesthetic experience. Looking at paintings in the museum could be one like that. Sport, literary writing, and this kind of experience is the same across culture, class, gender, and age, in all kinds of activities. There's something very human about flow state. Emergent motivation is what they talk about next. What happens at any moment is responsive to what happened immediately before within the interaction. And then proximal goals arise out of the interaction. So you basically, you have to kind of set yourself up to get into a flow state, and you have to be constantly evaluating and constantly creating new proximal goals, micro goals, goals that are close by. So you have to train your brain, I think, to do that. It is the subjectively perceived opportunities and capacities for action that determine experience. So we have to remember that flow state is all based on subjectivity and perspective. I think if it's subjective, then I think we're tricking ourselves into going into flow state. Not in a bad way, but I think it's in our head that we're in a flow state. It's really weird to think about that. Sports, games, and other flow activities provide goal and feedback structures that make flow more likely. And it's the subjective challenges and subjective skills, not the objective ones, that influence the quality of a person's experience. So you have to bring a unique sense of yourself to the activities that you engage in, I think, in order to reach these flow states. They're individual flow states based on what you are and what you think. So you can't be approaching it from another person's perspective. You need to get so intimate with that activity that you have your own perspective to bring to it. You need to create a feedback system to increase your flow. And it's even possible in the mundane acts like ironing clothes and driving cars. It's all about your subjectivity, so you can make it happen, but it's less likely in those. People are confronted with an overwhelming amount of information these days. So we have to remember about consciousness, attention, awareness, memory, and subjective experience, and how they create the self. These are all beginning sociology and psychology ideas that we probably studied first year of college. It's probably good to review them. Remember, consciousness, attention, awareness, memory, subjective experience creates the self. The ideas you choose to pop into your head, and your attention, and the level of attention, the quality of attention is reflective on the quality of your life. Consciousness gives us a measure of control, freeing us from complete subservience to the dictates of genes and culture by representing them in awareness, thereby introducing the alternative of rejecting rather than enacting them. So, we have this DNA, and we have these cultural rules that we're raised to follow, or we have to follow in order to survive, or in order to get along growing up as kids or whatnot. And we always have choices: rejecting our DNA compulsions and cultural compulsions, or enacting them. And alongside the genetic and cultural guides to action, it establishes a teleonomy of the self, a set of goals. Remember, telos is goal, a set of goals that have been freely chosen by the individual. Freely chosen, at least somewhat freely. It can be dangerous to disengage our behavior from direct control by genetic and cultural instructions. Those instructions are there to make life a little simpler, give us some guidelines to follow for survival, keep safe. But on the other hand, it can also increase our chances for adaptivity, for an adaptive fit with the present environment. Because again, we also know that everything's changing. Even DNA, even cultural rules. So this is really true under conditions of rapid change. And some argue that change, especially culturally or environmentally, is more rapid than ever these days, with technology changing and increasing with the rate of change. So again, the ability to regulate your attention is underappreciated. It's a real skill. Haley says that William James was right in claiming, "My experience is what I agree to attend to. Only those items which I notice shape my mind. The choices made are critical because attention is finite. This information is the medium of exchange between person and environment, as well as the material out of which the self is formed. Entering flow, then," this is where all of that I just said becomes important. "Entering flow is largely a function of how attention has been focused." Okay, entering flow is largely a function of how attention has been focused. Staying in flow requires that attention be held by this limited stimulus field. Apathy, boredom, and anxiety, like flow, are largely functions of how attention is being structured at any given time. In boredom, and even more so in apathy, the low level of challenge relative to skills allows attention to drift. In anxiety, perceived challenges exceed capacities. Knowing what we're capable of and how we're improving directly affects our ability to enter flow state. Think of a good book, a good challenging book. It's right at your challenging level. Those are the best books. We never read a romance novel or a cheesy spy